Hello, this is Barbara, and we are talking about how not to answer moral questions and a little about God and morality. The second essay, God and Morality, is just a bit more clarification on the subheading for God at the end of how not to answer moral questions. So, let's recap so far. This semester, we have started the way we've started so that you learn how to have a philosophical conversation or an ethical discussion, which is philosophical. 1 second. Brighton, you're talking. You want to come say hi to my students? Yeah. And then you can go back? Okay. Say hi, philosophy students.
Hi, philosophy students.
Oh, that's good. Now, Mommy has to do this, which means you have to be quiet, okay?
Okay.
Okay, go on. Sorry. Okay, so how not to answer moral questions. Oh, sorry. The way I've set this up is to have a philosophical conversation is not like other conversations. There's a certain way you do it. And the first thing you do is what we've talked about in the nature of ethical disagreement. You first find out who you're talking to's beliefs are. And you do that by questioning them. And you ask them why they feel the way they feel. And you keep asking until you understand their belief system. While you're questioning them, do not give your own opinions and attitudes, because that's going to take you off track and it's going to alter what they're saying. So your goal at the beginning of any conversation is to find out the position and the belief of the person you're talking to without judgment and without interrupting. You are going to ask them questions until you feel you understand them and their position and why they feel the way they feel and what's it based upon. Once you do that, then you can open a dialogue where you're discussing the issue based on the belief. And that's when you can add in your information and what your attitudes and beliefs are. And then, that's the first thing you do.
Mommy.
Okay. Listen, I have to do this because tomorrow's Monday and they need this because it starts new school week. I need you to go over there and let Mommy finish, okay?
Okay.
Go on. All right. So then, that's the first thing you need to know. The second thing you need to do is be logical, which is the second thing we did this semester. Logic essays. You need to figure out what you're saying, what it means, and how you make your statements lead to where you want them to go. All right? You're basing your conversations on logic. Once you've gotten the other person's belief system, you're now using logic to discuss it between the both of you. This next section of the essay is how not to answer moral questions and God and morality. These are the things we're not doing in a philosophical conversation. Now, some of this ties into the nature of ethical disagreement. When you read how not to answer moral questions, it comes in subheadings. And the first subheading is preferences. A preference is an attitude. It's what we learned about in the nature of ethical disagreement. You like something, you don't like something, you think something's good, bad, indifferent. Somebody else thinks the same thing. Do not confuse preferences with moral statements. Just because I like going the speed limit, well, that's a bad example. Just because I like...
Hi, students.
I never should have let you introduce yourself. You can't keep introducing yourself.
I won't.
You won't? Is this the last one?
Yeah.
Okay, so you should say, bye, philosophy students.
Hi, philosophy students.
Good. Go on, babe. Go play. Just because it's an attitude doesn't mean that's a moral statement. You haven't tried to prove anything. No. You've just suggested a premise. All right? You just suggested this is a preference. It is not actual moral statement because you haven't backed up what you're saying. Just because someone likes this thing or doesn't like this thing doesn't make them moral judgments. Brighton Durrell Velez. I'm about to turn that Xbox off if you don't let mommy do her thing. I'm sorry. So attitudes, you can't use attitudes. The next subheading is thinking it doesn't make it so. Just because a thought pops into your head doesn't make it ethical. Doesn't make it an ethical statement. Doesn't mean it's the truth. And there are people in our world that thinks just because it pops into their head, just because they have a thought, that that thought is accurate. It's not. It's just a thought. Until you analyze it, think about it, and figure out why you thought it in the first place, you can't make any judgments on whether it's accurate or not. So just because it pops into your head, just because other people's ideas pop in their head, thinking it doesn't make it so. So you have to recognize the difference between a thought and an attitude and a belief. How is it all connected? Well, just because you have a thought doesn't make it so. And a thought is probably related to an attitude, which again is not an actual moral statement. It's not something that it's a belief statement. Thoughts and preferences are not belief statements. They're not things you can talk about. They're just either a thought that pops into your head or a preference. All right, next one, statistics. Statistics, it's just another way saying the majority isn't right. Just because 100 people out of 150 think that the best sunglasses are Ray-Bans, does that make Ray-Bans the best sunglasses? No. Just because, let's say, the majority of the human race believes all women should have long hair. Does that mean all women should have long hair? No, it doesn't. And think about historically. There's so many historical examples where the majority of people have done the wrong thing. I mean, just because a lot of people agree on it doesn't make it moral. It just means a lot of people agree on it. And the last one, and this is one that has had issues in the past in my classes, is God. Why are we not using God as a basis for our morality in this class? It's not that you as a person can't do so.
Blanky got in the way. Blanky, don't do that. Don't do. Blanky did that.
Shh.
I want to play.
Brighton Darrell Velez, I will turn this on if you let me be until I'm done. Do you understand?
I think that will be down here.
You want me to turn it back on? Are you gonna be quiet?
I don't know how to make my place set then.
Well, after I'm done, which is only another 5 minutes if you can give it to me, I will help you. If you keep interrupting, I will not help you. Okay? I'm sorry. I don't want to start back over, so I'm going to keep going. Ignore the last 30 seconds. God. All right. If you're trying to have an ethical discussion with someone, and why do we not want to bring God and religion into it? This is why. First of all, it's not a philosophical discussion then it's a theological or religious discussion. And if you, personally, you can have it as a basis for your morality, but we're not using it in an ethics class because this isn't a theology class. People have different religions, people have different beliefs about whether or not God exists. And when you bring God into the issue or religion into it, you change the philosophical discussion into a theological discussion. Think about it. If a theist, someone that believes in God, let's say a Christian who believes in the King James Version, talks to another Christian who believes in the, I'm blanking on the name of the other popular translation of the Bible. Starts with a C. Anyway, two different translations of the Bible that have some differences in them. And let's say they're sitting there and they see a man walk by with Speedos. And the first person looks to the second person and says, that's immoral. And the second person says, why do you think so? And then they start talking about Bible verses. Well, this person's Bible verses are not the same as this person's Bible verses. So then they end up having a discussion, not about whether the morality of wearing Speedos, but which version of the Bible is correct. And you don't actually talk about the issue that you're trying to talk about. Okay? So the second issue is, let's say we have a conversation, and this time you have a conversation between a theist and an atheist. Now, a theist believes in God, and an atheist does not. So, same issue. The theist and the atheist are sitting there. A man with Speedos walks by, and the first one says, let's say that the theist says, that's wrong. And the second person says, really, why? And the first person starts quoting Bible verses. And the second person, this isn't a game, the TV's going off. And the second person says, well, I don't believe in God. I don't take the Bible as the Word of God. Now, what's going to happen to the conversation? Are they going to talk about the morality of Speedos? No. They are going to get into a debate about whether God exists and about whether or not the holy text is a holy text. All right? So, whenever you bring as a basis for ethics, a belief in God, religion specifically, a holy text, the conversation changes. It's no longer an ethical discussion that everybody can take part in. It turns the discussion from ethics to theology or religion. Now, if you personally believe in God, there's no issue here. If you are religious, there's no issue here. But if you want to discuss ethical issues through your religion, you need to take theology or religion. World religions is great, by the way. Other than that, for philosophy, you're not doing it because that's not our topic. Our topic is ethics, philosophical ethics. So we're using logic to discuss our issues, not religion. Now, I know I've had a few students in the past be offended by this. My family's religious. I understand it. I don't have a problem with religion. I'm not suggesting that you don't even use your religion. But you're not using it in this class as a basis for what you're saying because it changes the conversation from philosophy or ethics to religion. And I don't want that. If you want that, that's okay, but take the different class so you can do it. All right. Now, the second essay, that was the last one on how not to answer moral questions. Then we go into the essay called God and Morality by Stephen Kahn, the editor of the essay. He really is going to go into more depth about the issue of God and about not only how it turns the conversation somewhere else, but he's going to talk about verifying God's statements. So the key idea here is think about it. Think about what we've learned from the nature of ethical disagreement. Someone can give you their preference. So if God, let's take an example of the Ten Commandments. Is the Ten Commandments God's... One moment. Is the Ten Commandments God's attitude or God's beliefs? We don't know. So, is something moral because God says it? Or is it moral because God says it because it's moral? If God says it because it's moral, then there's something about it that makes it moral, independent of whether God says it or not. And then what about the other issue? What if, just because God says it, it's moral? Then we're going to define morality about what God says. So if God says go kill 100 people. Is that moral? If you believe that God's saying it makes it moral, then it would be. But generally, we don't believe that. We believe there's a morality outside of God. And if that's the case, let's say for a moment, everybody believes in God. All right. So now we know that God exists, and we know that God gave us, say, the Ten Commandments. We still don't know why God picked the Ten Commandments. We don't know if those are God's preferences or God's beliefs. We don't know if we need to verify it. We need God to be sitting here so we can say, oh, God, why do you feel that way? And you keep asking God why God feels that way until you understand his position and then understand his belief. Otherwise, the Ten Commandments are a list of God's preferences. So if it's a preference, you can't independently verify God. If God is saying these things because they're moral, and not just because he likes them, then morality has a standard. And what we need to understand is the standard which God is using. Because otherwise, we can't verify that it's actually ethical. If you bother me one more time, I have only asked for 15, 20 minutes to do this. You are losing.
No. Sorry.
Brighton Dervelez, give me 5 minutes to finish this. I'm sorry. God, if there's a standard, what we need is the standard of which to know why God says it. Because what we're trying to understand is ethics. What makes something ethical, what makes it right or wrong. God saying it doesn't actually tell us what makes it right or wrong. It just tells us God says it. Then we end up in a discussion about whether or not, because God says it, whether it's moral, or is it moral because God says it? Wait, I think I messed that up. Is it moral because God says it, or is it the reason God said it is because it's moral? I know, it can get tricky here. And what we need to do is verify God's statements for being moral. And you verify it through ethical discussion to see if it matches up. And thinking in case for a plumber, I think this was in How Not to Answer More Questions. You want to get a good plumber. So, the plumber tells you he's good. Are you going to leave it at that and go, oh, the plumber says he's good. The plumber said he's good. He should know he's a plumber. Or are you going to go on the websites and look up reviews and try to contact people and find out, verify the plumber's statement? This is what we're going to apply to God. God's saying it. For ethical discussions, you would have to analyze why God is saying it, not just accept it because God said it, because it could just be a preference of God's, and that doesn't make it moral. That makes it an attitude. All right. I hope this helped. I'm sorry for all the interruptions. All right, you come here.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry
Now,
I did that.
you say, I'm sorry I interrupted your lecture.
I'm sorry I don't know what I got, y'all.
All right. Do you mean it?
I mean it.
All right. I'll catch y'all later.